back to another day of daily reading. We're reading through the whole Bible, and we're on day 24. We're in First Kings. We just started First Kings yesterday, and we're gonna read only about 9 chapters. So that tells us that they're going to be pretty long chapters. Well, I missed my page here. First and Second Kings is kind of like First and Second Samuel. They were originally written as one big book, but it has been divided. I don't know. We think of books in a way that they didn't think of books. I mean, they had scrolls, and Kings would have been a scroll. It would have been something that they cherished and kept with them. I mean, I don't know if you could imagine. Maybe you have written a whole book of the Bible by hand, but they couldn't imagine. This word is so precious, and we just think of it as another book a lot of times, but this book is incredibly precious. I mean, just if you really think about how we have this word, and I came into it so skeptically, coming in like, and I've said in my testimony, if you've ever watched my personal testimony or some other things, man, how could this book be accurate? And if you really study it, and if you really go in and you start finding manuscripts that say the exact same things in another language, of course, the things that we argue about in translation don't ever change what the text actually means. I mean, you might find something critically in the text that helps you understand it better, but that doesn't change what it originally meant. And when we say that the Bible is inerrant and trustworthy, the people that study that study textual criticism have found that that's the truth. But today we're going to begin in 1 Kings chapter 2, and we're going to read all the way through chapter 10. Yeah. 1 Kings chapter 10. And it's probably about an hour and 10 or 15 minutes. So that's just how long it takes. I love doing this. So let's start reading in chapter 2. When time drew near for David to die, he gave charge to Solomon, his son. I am about to go the way of all the earth, he said. So be strong, act like a man, and observe what the Lord your God requires. Walk in obedience to him, and keep his decrees and commands, his laws and regulations, as written in the law of Moses. Do this so that you may prosper in all that you do and wherever you go, and that the Lord may keep his promise to me. If your descendants watch how they live, and if they walk faithfully before me with all their heart and soul, you will never fail to have a successor on the throne of Israel. Verse 5. Now you yourself know that Joab, son of Zeruiah, did what Joab, son of Zeruiah, did to me, and what he did to the 2 commanders of Israel's armies, Abner, son of Ner, and Amasa, son of Jether. He killed them, shedding their blood in peacetime as if in battle. And with that blood he stained the belt around his waist and the sandals on his feet. Deal with him according to your wisdom, but do not let his gray hair go down in the grave in peace. Verse 7. Show kindness to the sons of Barzillai of Gilead, and let them be known among those who eat at your table. They stood by me when I fled from your brother Absalom. Verse 8. And remember that you have with you Shimei, son of Gera, the Benjamite from Bahurim, who called down bitter curses on me the day I went to Mahanaim. When he came down to meet me at the Jordan, I swore to him by the Lord, I will not put you to death by the sword, But now do not consider him innocent. You are a man of wisdom. You will know what to do to him. Bring his gray head down into the grave in blood. Verse 10. Then David rested with his ancestors and was buried in the city of David. He had reigned 40 years over Israel, and 7 years in Hebron, and 33 in Jerusalem. So Solomon sat on the throne of his father David, and his rule was firmly established. Verse 13. Now Adonijah, the son of Haggith, went to Bathsheba, Solomon's mother. Bathsheba asked him, "Do you come peacefully?" He answered, "Yes, peacefully." And then he added, "I have something to say to you." "You may say it," she replied. "As you know," he said, "the kingdom was mine. All Israel looked to me as their king, but things changed, and the kingdom has gone to my brother, for it has come to him from the Lord. Now I have one request to make of you. Do not refuse me." "You may make it," she said. So he continued, "Please ask King Solomon, he will not refuse you, to give me Abishag, the Shunammite, as my wife." "Very well," Bathsheba replied. "I will speak to the king for you." When Bathsheba went to King Solomon to speak to him for Adonijah, the king stood up to meet her, bowed down to her, and sat down on his throne. He had a throne brought for the king's mother, and she sat down at his right hand. Verse 20. "I have one small request to make of you," she said. "Do not refuse me." The king replied, "Make it, my mother. I will not refuse you." So she said, "Let Abishag the Shunammite be given in marriage to your brother Adonijah." 22. King Solomon answered his mother, "Why do you request Abishag the Shunammite for Adonijah? You might as well request the kingdom for him. After all, he is my oldest brother. Yes, for him, and for Abiathar the priest, and Joab the son of Zeruiah." Verse 23, Then King Solomon swore by the Lord, "May God deal with me, be it ever so severely, if Adonijah does not pay with his life for this request. And now, as surely as the Lord lives, he who has established me securely on the throne of my father David has founded a dynasty for me, as he promised. Adonijah shall be put to death today." So King Solomon gave orders to Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, and he struck down Adonijah, and he died. 26. To Abiathar the priest, the king said, "Go back to your fields at Anathoth. You deserve to die, but I will not put you to death now, because you carried the ark of the sovereign Lord before my father David, and shared my father's hardships." So Solomon removed Abiathar from the priesthood of the Lord, fulfilling the word of the Lord had spoken at Shiloh about the house of Eli. See, if you remember backwards, Abiathar was a descendant of the son that was born after. Remember Eli and Hophni and Phinehas's grandson is who Adonijah is, or Abiathar is, and they weren't supposed to be in the priesthood. And Saul had installed them. If you really, really, really kind of understand what we've been through, it took me twice of reading the whole Bible, and these things are just now starting to come together in a way that it's just like, wow. So I'm sorry. I just get caught up sometimes. Verse 28. When the news reached Joab, he had conspired with Adonijah, though not with Absalom. He fled to the tent of the Lord and took hold of the horns of the altar. King Solomon was told that Joab fled to the tent of the Lord and was beside the altar. Then Solomon ordered Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, "Go strike him down." So Benaiah entered the tent of the Lord and said to Joab, "The king says, 'Come out.'" But he answered, "No, I will die here." Benaiah reported to the king, "This is how Joab answered me." Then the king commanded Benaiah, "Do as he said, strike him down, and bury him, and so clear me and my whole family of the guilty of the innocent blood that Joab shed. The Lord will repay him for the blood he shed, because without my father knowing it, he attacked 2 men and killed them with the sword, both of them, Abner, son of Ner, commander of Israel's army, and Amasa, son of Jether, commander of Judah's army. Were better men and more upright than he. May the guilt of their blood rest on the head of Joab and his descendants forever. But David and his descendants, his house and his throne, may there be the Lord's peace forever." 34. So Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, went up and struck down Joab and killed him, and he was buried at his home in the country. The king put Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, over the army in Joab's position, and replaced Abiathar with Zadok the priest. Then the king sent for Shimei and said to him, "Build yourself a house in Jerusalem and live there, but do not go anywhere else. The day you can leave and cross the Kidron Valley, you can be sure you will die. Your blood will be on your own head." Shimei answered the king, "What you say is good. Your servant will do as the Lord my king has said." And Shimei stayed in Jerusalem for a long time. But 3 years later, 2 of Shimei's slaves ran off to Achish, son of Maacah, king of Gath, and Shimei was told, "Your slaves are in Gath." At this he saddled his donkey and went to Achish at Gath in search of his slaves. So Shimei went away and brought the slaves back from Gath. 41. When Solomon was told that Shimei had gone from Jerusalem to Gath and had returned, the king summoned Shimei and said to him, "Did I not make you swear by the Lord and warn you, on the day you leave and go anywhere else, you can be sure you will die? At that time you said to me, 'What you say is good. Well, I will obey.' But why then did you not keep your oath to the Lord and obey the command that I gave you?" 44. The king also said to Shimei, "You know in your heart the wrong that you did to my father David. Now the Lord will repay you for your wrongdoing. But King Solomon will be blessed, and David's throne will remain secure before the Lord forever." Then the king gave the order to Benaiah of Jehoiada, and he went out and struck Shimei down, and he died. The kingdom was now established in Solomon's hands. So we had a little bit of house cleaning to do from the house of David. You know, that's a pretty common thing. I think kingship usually kills all of the loyalty before that. You know, and I guess for reasons, but that's just how ancient times goes, man. I'm kind of glad that we don't have to. I think that a new president coming in fires everybody from the staff, from the other president, especially if there's a changing of the guard in a different political party. But, in some places, I'm sure they still do have to kill them. But, man, just, I don't know. This is true history. So, Chapter 3. Solomon made an alliance with Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and married his daughter. He brought her to the city of David until he finished building his palace and the temple of the Lord and the wall around Jerusalem. The people, however, were still sacrificing at the high places because the temple had not been built for the name of the Lord. Solomon showed his love for the Lord by walking according to the instructions given to him by his father David, except that he offered sacrifices and burned incense on the high places. Verse 4. The king went to Gibeon to offer sacrifices, for that was the most important high place, and Solomon offered 1,000 burnt offerings on the altar. At Gibeon, the Lord appeared to Solomon during the night in a dream, and God said, "Ask for whatever you want me to give you." Verse 6. Solomon answered, "You have shown great kindness to your servant, my father David, because he was faithful to you and righteous and upright in heart. You have continued his great kindness to him and given him a son to sit on his throne this very day." Verse 7. Now, Lord, my God, you have made your servant in my place, your servant king in place of my father David. But I am only a little child, and do not know how to carry out my duties. Your servant is here among the people you have chosen, a great people, too numerous to count. So give your servant a discerning heart to govern your people, to distinguish between right and wrong. For who is able to govern this great people of yours? Verse 10. The Lord was pleased that Solomon had asked for this. So God said to him, "Since you have asked for this, and not for long life or wealth for yourself, nor have you asked me for the death of your enemies, but for discerning and administering justice, for discernment and administering justice, I will do what you have asked for. I will give you a wise and discerning heart, so that there will never have been anyone like you, nor will there ever be. Moreover, I will give you what you have not asked for, both wealth and honor, so that in your lifetime you will have no equal among kings. And you will walk in obedience to me, and if you will walk in obedience to me and keep my decrees and commandments, as David, your father, did, I will give you a long life." Then Solomon awoke, and he realized it had been a dream. He returned to Jerusalem and stood before the ark of the Lord's covenant and sacrificed burnt offerings and fellowship offerings, and then he gave a feast for all his court. Verse 16. Now 2 prostitutes came to the king and stood before him. One of them said, "Pardon me, my lord. This woman and I live in the same house. I had a baby while she was there with me. On the 3rd day after my child was born, this woman also had a baby. We were alone, and there was no one in the house but the 2 of us. During that night, this woman's son died because she lay on him. So she got up in the middle of the night and took my son from my side while your servant was asleep, and she put him by her breast, and her dead son by my breast. The next morning I got up to nurse my son, and he was dead. But then I looked at him closely in the morning light, and I saw that it wasn't my son I had born." 22. The other woman said, "No, the living one is my son, and the dead one is yours." But the first one insisted, "No, the dead one is yours, the living one is mine." So they argued before the king. 23. The king said, "This one says, 'My son is alive, and your son is dead,' while that one says, 'No, your son is dead, and mine is alive.'" Then the king said, "Bring me a sword." So they brought a sword for the king. Then he gave an order, "Cut the living child in 2, and give half to one and half to the other." Verse 26. The woman whose son was alive was deeply moved out of the love for her son, and she said to the king, "Please, my lord, give her the living baby. Don't kill him." But the other said, "Neither I nor you shall have him. Cut him in 2." 27. The king gave his ruling. "Give the living baby to the first woman. Do not kill him. She is the mother." 28. And when all Israel heard the verdict that the king had given, they held the king in awe because they saw that he had wisdom from God to administer justice. Chapter 4. So King Solomon ruled over all Israel, and these were his chief officials. Azariah, son of Zadok, the priest, Eli-Horeph, and Ahijah, sons of Shisha, secretaries. Jehoshaphat, son of Alihud, recorder. Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, commander-in-chief. Zadok and Abiathar, priests. 5. Zariah, son of Nathan, in charge of the district governors. Zabud, son of Nathan, a priest and advisor to the king. Ahishar, palace administrator. Adoniram, son of Abda, in charge of forced labor. Verse 7. Solomon had 12 district governors over all Israel, who supplied provisions for the king and the royal household. Each one had to provide supplies for 1 month in the year. These are their names: Ben-Hur, in the hill country of Ephraim; Ben-Decker, in Makaz, Sha'albim, Beth-Shemesh, and Elon Beth-Hanan. Ben-Hesed, in Aruboth, Succo, and the land of Hefer were his. Ben-Abinadab, in Naphoth Dor. He was also married to Taphath, daughter of Solomon. Excuse me. Verse 12. Ba'ana, son of Alihud, the Ta'anach, and Megiddo, and all of Beth Shan next to Zarathan, below Jezreel, and from Beth Shan to Abel Micholach, across to Jokamim. Ben Geber, in Ramoth Gilead, the settlements of Jair, son of Manasseh, in Gilead were his. All was the region of Argob in Bashan, and its 60 large walled cities with bronze gates and bars. Ahinadab, son of Iddo, in Mahanaim, and Ahimaaz in Naphtali. He had married Besemath, daughter of Solomon. Ba'ana, son of Hushai, in Asher, and in Eloth. Jehoshaphat, son of Paruah, in Issachar. Shimei, son of Elah, in Benjamin. Geber, son of Uri, in Gilead, the country of Sihon, king of the Amorites, and the country of Og of Bashan. He was the only governor over the district. Verse 20. The people of Judah and Israel were as numerous as the sand on the seashore. They ate, they drank, and they were happy. And Solomon ruled over all the kingdoms from the Euphrates River to the land of the Philistines, as far as the border of Egypt. These countries brought tribute, and were Solomon's subjects all his life. 22. Solomon's daily provisions were 30 cores of the finest flour and 60 cores of meal, 10 head of stall-fed cattle, and 20 pasture-fed cattle, and 100 sheep and goats, as well as deer, gazelles, roebucks, and choice fowl. for he had ruled over all the kingdoms of the west and the west of the Euphrates River from Tafsah to Gaza, and had peace on all sides. During Solomon's lifetime, Judah and Israel, from Dan to Beersheba, lived in safety, everyone under their own vine and under their own fig tree. 26. Solomon had 4,000 stalls, 4 chariot horses, and 12,000 horses. 27. The district governors, each in his month, supplied the provisions for King Solomon and all who came to the king's table. They saw to it that nothing was lacking. They also brought to the proper place their quotas of barley and straw for the chariot horses and the other horses. Verse 29. God gave Solomon wisdom, very great insight. And a breadth of understanding is measureless as the sand on the seashore. Solomon's wisdom was greater than the wisdom of all the people of the East, and greater than all the wisdom of Egypt. He was wiser than anyone else, including Ethan the Ezrahite, wiser than Heman, Calcol, and Darda, the sons of Mahol. And his fame spread through all the surrounding nations. He spoke 3,000 proverbs, and his songs numbered 1,005. He spoke about plant life, from the cedar of Lebanon to the hyssop that grows out of the walls. He also spoke about farm animals and birds, reptiles and fish. From nations, people came to listen to Solomon's wisdom, sent by all the kings of the world who had heard of his wisdom. Chapter 5. When Hiram, king of Tyre, heard that Solomon had been anointed king to succeed his father David, he sent envoys to Solomon, because he had always been on friendly terms with David. Solomon sent back this message to Hiram. Verse 3. You know that because of the wars waged against my father David from all sides, he could not build a temple for the name of the Lord his God until the Lord put his enemies under his feet. But now the Lord my God has given me rest on every side, and there is no adversary or disaster. I intend therefore to build a temple for the name of the Lord my God, as the Lord told my father David, when he said, Your son, whom I will put on the throne in your place, will build the temple for my name. Verse 6. So give orders that cedars of Lebanon be cut for me. My men will work with yours, and I will pay you for your men and whatever wages you set. You know that we have no one so skilled in felling timber as the Sidonians. Verse 7. When Hiram heard Solomon's message, he was greatly pleased, and he said, Praise be to the Lord today, for he has given David a wise son to rule over this great nation. So Hiram sent word to Solomon, I have received your message you sent me, and will do all you want in providing the cedar and juniper logs. My men will haul them down from Lebanon to the Mediterranean Sea, and I will float them as rafts by the sea to the place you specify. There I will separate them, and you can take them away. And you are to grant my wish by providing food for my royal household. Verse 10. In this way Hiram kept Solomon supplied with all the cedar and juniper logs he wanted, and Solomon gave Hiram 20,000 cores of wheat as food for his household, in addition to 20,000 baths of pressed olive oil. Solomon continued to do this for Hiram year after year, and the Lord gave Solomon just as he had promised him. There were peaceful relations between Hiram and Solomon, and the two of them made a treaty. King Solomon conscripted laborers from all Israel, 30,000 men. He sent them to Lebanon in shifts of 10,000 a month, so that they spent 1 month in Lebanon and 2 months at home. Adoniram was in charge of the forced labor. Solomon had 70,000 carriers and 80,000 stone cutters in the hills, as well as 3,300 foremen who supervised the project and directed the workers. At the king's command, they removed from the quarry large blocks of high-grade stone to provide foundation for the dressed stone of the temple, for the temple. The craftsmen of Solomon and Hiram and workers from Byblos cut and prepared the timber and stone for the building of the temple. Chapter 6. In the 418th year after the Israelites came out of Egypt, in the 4th year of Solomon's reign over Israel, in the month of Ziv, the 2nd month, he began to build the temple of the Lord. The temple that King Solomon built for the Lord was 60 cubits long, 20 wide, and 30 high. The portico at the front of the main hall of the temple extended the width of the temple, and that is 20 cubits, and projected 10 cubits from the front of the temple. He made narrow windows high up in the temple walls. Against the walls of the main hall and the inner sanctuary, he built a structure around the building, in which there were side rooms. The lowest floor was 5 cubits wide, the middle floor 6 cubits, and the third floor 7. He made offset ledges around the outside of the temple so that nothing would be inserted into the temple walls. Verse 7. In building the temple, only blocks dressed at the quarry were used. No hammer, chisel, or any iron tool was heard at the temple while it was being built. Verse 8. The entrance to the lowest floor was on the south side of the temple. A stairway led up to the middle level, from there to the third. So he built the temple and completed it, roofing it with beams and cedar planks, and he built the side rooms all along the temple. The height of each was 5 cubits, and they were attached to the temple by beams of cedar. The word of the Lord came to Solomon. As for this temple you are building, if you are following my decrees, observe my laws, and keep all my commands and obey them, I will fulfill throughout you the promise I gave to David your father. And I will live among the Israelites and not abandon my people, Israel. So Solomon built the temple and completed it. He lined its interior walls with cedar boards, paneling them from the floor of the temple to the ceiling, and covered the floor of the temple with planks of juniper. Man, wouldn't that smell awesome? He partitioned off 20 cubits at the rear of the temple with cedar boards from the floor to the ceiling, and from within the temple at the inner sanctuary, the most holy place. The main hall in front of this room was 40 cubits long. The inside of the temple was cedar, carved with gourds and open flowers. Everything was cedar. No stone was to be seen. Verse 19. He prepared the inner sanctuary within the temple to set the ark of the covenant of the Lord there. The inner sanctuary was 20 cubits long, 20 wide, and 20 high. He overlaid the inside with pure gold, and he also overlaid the altar of cedar. Solomon covered the inside of the temple with pure gold, And he extended gold chains across the front of the inner sanctuary, which was overlaid with gold. So he overlaid the whole interior with gold. He also overlaid with gold the altar that belonged to the inner sanctuary. 23. For the inner sanctuary he made a pair of cherubim out of olive wood, each 10 cubits high. One wing of the first cherub was 5 cubits long, and the other wing was 5 cubits. That's like 15 feet. These are huge things. 10 cubits from wingtip to wingtip. The second cherub was also measured 10 cubits, for the 2 cherubim were identical in size and shape. The height of each cherub was 10 cubits. So 10 cubits would be 15 feet. So, we're just talking about big things. Big, beautiful cherubs. So the height of each cherub was 10 cubits. He placed the cherubim inside the innermost room of the temple, with their wings spread out. The wing of one cherub touched the one wall, and the wing of the other touched the other wall. Their wings touched each other in the middle of the room. He overlaid the cherubim with gold. Verse 29. On the walls all around the temple, both the inner and the outer rooms, he carved cherubim, palm trees, and open flowers. He also covered the floors of both the inner and outer rooms of the temple with gold. Usually we're just talking about a gold room. This is crazy. Verse 31. For the entrance to the inner sanctuary, he made the doors out of olive wood that were 1/5 of the width of the sanctuary. Width of the sanctuary. And on the 2 olive wood doors he carved cherubim, palm trees, and open flowers, and overlaid the cherubim and palm trees with hammered gold. In the same way, for the entrance to the main hall, he made door frames out of olive wood that were 1/4 of the width of the hall, and he also made 2 doors out of juniper wood, each having 2 leaves that turned in sockets. He carved cherubim, palm trees, and open flowers and overlaid them with hammered gold, hammered evenly over the carvings. Verse 36. And he built the inner courtyard of 3 courses of dressed stone and 1 course of trimmed cedar beams. Verse 37. The foundation of the temple of the Lord was laid in the 4th year in the month of Ziv. In the 11th year of the month of Bul, the 8th month, the temple was finished, and all its details according to its specifications. He had spent 7 years building it. Chapter 7. It took Solomon 13 years, however, to complete the construction of his palace. He built the palace of the forest of Lebanon 100 cubits long, 50 wide, and 30 high, with 4 rows of cedar columns supporting trimmed cedar beams. It was roofed with cedar above the beams that rested on the columns. 45 beams, 15 to a row, with its windows were placed high in sets of 3, facing each other. All the doorways had rectangular frames, and they were in the front part of in sets of 3, facing each other. He made a colonnade, 50 cubits long and 30 wide. In front of it was a portico. In front of that were pillars and an overhanging roof. Verse 7. He built the stone hall, the hall of justice, where he was to judge, and he covered it with cedar from floor to ceiling, and the place in which he was to live, set further back, was similar in design. Solomon also made a palace like his hall for Pharaoh's daughter, whom he had married. Verse 9. All these structures, from the outside of the great courtyard and from the foundation to the eaves, were made of blocks of high-grade cut stone, cut to size and smoothed on their inner and outer faces. The foundations were laid with large stones of good quality, some measuring 10 cubits and some 8. Above them were high-grade stones cut to size and cedar beams. The great courtyard was surrounded by a wall of 3 courses of dressed stone and 1 course of trimmed cedar beams. That was the inner courtyard of the temple of the Lord with its portico. Verse 13. King Solomon sent to Tyre and brought Huram, whose mother was a widow from the tribe of Naphtali, and whose father was from Tyre, a skilled craftsman in bronze. Huram was filled with wisdom, with understanding, and with knowledge to do all kinds of bronze work. He came to King Solomon and did all the work assigned to him. 15. He cast 2 bronze pillars, each 18 cubits high and 12 cubits in circumference. He also made 2 capitals of cast bronze to set on the tops of the pillars. Each capital was 5 cubits high. A network of interwoven chains adorned the capitals on top of the pillars, 7 for each capital. He made pomegranates in 2 rows, encircling each network to decorate the capitals on top of the pillars. He did the same for each capital. The capital on top of the pillars in the portico were in the shape of lilies, 4 cubits high. On the capitals of both pillars above the bowl-shaped part next to the network, there were 200 pomegranates all in rows all around. He erected the pillars at the portico of the temple, and the pillar to the south he named Jachin, and the other, and the one to the north, Boaz. 22. The capitals on the top were in the shape of lilies, and so the work on pillars was completed. 23. He made the sea of cast metal. That's a big bowl. Circular in shape, measuring 10 cubits from rim to rim, and 5 cubits high. It took a line of 30 cubits to measure around it. Bowl below the rim, gourds encircled it, 10 to a cubit. The gourds were cast in 2 rows, in one piece with the sea. 25. The sea stood on 12 bulls, 3 facing north, 3 facing south, 3 facing north, 3 facing west, 3 facing south, and 3 facing east. The sea rested on top of them. Their hindquarters were toward the center. It was a handbreadth in thickness, and its rim was like the rim of a cup, like a lily blossom. It held 2,000 baths. Just try and imagine, close your eyes and just try and imagine this stuff that I'm describing. I mean, it just looks like you're building, the only thing we can really equate it to would be like ancient Greece. All of this stuff got destroyed in the year 78, or actually 586 BC. And the next temple wasn't nothing like this. This isn't the temple that Jesus visited. We'll keep on. Verse 27. He also made 10 movable stands of bronze. Each was 4 cubits long and 4 cubits wide and 4 wide and 3 high. This is how the stands were made. They had side panels attached to the uprights. On the panels between the uprights were lions, bulls, and cherubim. And on the uprights as well, above and below the lions and bulls, were wreaths of hammered work. Each stand had 4 bronze wheels on bronze axles, and each had a basin and resting on floor supports. cast with wreaths on each side. On the inside of the stand was an opening that had a circular frame 1 cubit deep. This opening was round, and with its base work it measured 1.5 cubits. Around its opening there was engraved. The panels of the stands were square, not round. The 4 wheels under the panels and the axles of the wheels were attached to the stand. The diameter of each wheel was 1.5 cubits. These wheels were made like chariot wheels. The axles, rims, spokes, and hubs were all of cast metal. 34. Each stand had 4 handles on each corner projecting from the stand. At the top of the stand there was a circular band 1/2 cubit deep, and the supports of his panels were attached to the top of the stand. He engraved cherubim, lions, and palm trees on the surfaces of the supports and on the panels and every available space with wreaths all around. This was the way that he made the 10 stands. They were all cast in the same molds and were identical in size and shape. 38. He then made 10 bronze basins, each holding 40 baths, and measuring 4 cubits across, 1 basin to go on each of the 10 stands. He placed 5 of the stands on the south side of the temple and 5 on the north. He placed the sea on the south side of the southeast corner of the temple. He also made the pots and shovels and sprinkling bowls. So Huram finished all the work that he had undertaken for Solomon in the temple of the Lord. 41. The 2 pillars, the 2 bowl-shaped capitals on top of the pillars, the 2 sets of network decorating the 2 bowl-shaped capitals on top of the pillars, the 400 pomegranates for the 2 sets of network, 2 rows of pomegranates for each network decorating the bowl-shaped capitals on top of the pillars. 43. The 10 stands with their 10 basins, the sea and the 12 bowls under it, the pots, shovels, and sprinkling bowls. All these objects that Huram made for King Solomon for the temple of the Lord were of burnished bronze. The king had them cast in clay molds in the plain of the Jordan between Sukkoth and Zarethan. Solomon left all these things unweighed, because there were so many of the weight of the bronze was not determined. Solomon also made all the furnishings that were in the Lord's temple: the golden altar, the golden table on which was the bread of the presence, the lampstands of pure gold, 5 on the right and 5 on the left in the front of the inner sanctuary, the gold floral work on the lamps and tongs, the pure gold basins, wicks, trimmers, sprinkling bowls, dishes, and censers, and the gold sockets for the doors of the innermost room, the most holy place, and for the doors of the main hall of the temple. 51. When all the work King Solomon had done for the temple of the Lord was finished, he brought in the things that his father David had dedicated, the silver and gold and the furnishings, and he placed them in the treasuries of the Lord's temple. Chapter 8. Then King Solomon summoned into his presence at Jerusalem the elders of Israel, all the heads of the tribes and the chiefs of the Israelite families, to bring up the ark of the Lord's covenant from Zion, the city of David. All the Israelites came together to King Solomon at the time of the festival of the month of Ethanim, the 7th month. Verse 3. When all the elders of Israel had arrived, the priests took up the ark, and they had brought up the ark of the Lord, and the tent of meeting, and all the sacred furnishings in it. The priests and the Levites carried them up, And King Solomon and the entire assembly of Israel that had gathered about him were before the ark, sacrificing so many sheep and cattle that they could not be recorded or counted. Verse 6. The priests then brought the ark of the Lord's covenant to its place in the inner sanctuary of the temple, the most holy place, and put it beneath the wings of the cherubim. The cherubim spread their wings over the place of the ark, and overshadowed the ark and its carrying poles. These poles were so long that their ends could be seen from the holy place in front of the inner sanctuary, but not from outside the holy place. They are still there today. There was nothing in the ark except the 2 stone tablets that Moses placed in it at Horeb, where the Lord had made a covenant with the Israelites after they came out of Egypt. When the priests drew from verse 10, when the priests drew from the holy place, the cloud filled the temple of the Lord, and the priests could not perform their services because of the cloud. For the temple of the Lord for the glory of the Lord filled his temple. Verse 12. Then Solomon said, "The Lord has said he would dwell in a dark cloud. I have indeed built a magnificent temple for you, a place for you to dwell forever." Verse 14. While the whole assembly of Israel was standing there, the king turned around and blessed them. He said, "Praise be to the Lord, the God of Israel. With his own hand he has fulfilled what he promised, and with his own mouth by my father David. For he said, since the day I brought my people my people Israel out of Egypt, I have not chosen a city in any tribe of Israel to have my temple built so that my name might be there. But I have chosen David to rule my people Israel." 17. My father David had it in his heart to build a temple for the name of the Lord, the God of Israel. But the Lord said to my father David, "You did well to have in your heart to build a temple for my name. Nevertheless, you are not the one to build the temple, but your son, your own flesh and blood. He is the one who will build a temple for my name." 20. The Lord has kept his promise he made. I have succeeded David my father, and now I sit on the throne of Israel, just as the Lord promised. And I have built the temple for the name of the Lord, the God of Israel. I have provided a place there for the ark, in which the covenant of the Lord in which is the covenant of the Lord that he made with our ancestors when he brought them out of Egypt. Verse 22. Then Solomon stood before the altar of the Lord in front of the whole assembly of Israel, and spread out his hands towards heaven. He said, "Lord, the God of Israel, there is no God like you in heaven above, or on earth below. You who keep your covenant of love with your servants, who continue wholeheartedly in your way. You have kept your promise to your servant David, my father. Now with your mouth you have promised, and with your hand you have fulfilled it as it is today." 25. Now, Lord, the God of Israel, keep for your servant David, my father, the promises you made to him when you said, "You shall never fail to have a successor to sit before me on the throne of Israel. If only your descendants are careful in all they do to walk before me faithfully as you have done. And now, God of Israel, let your word that you promised your servant David, my father, come true." 27. But will God really dwell on earth? The heavens, even the highest heaven, cannot contain you. How much less is this temple I have built? How much less the temple I have built? Yet Give attention to your servant's prayer and his plead for mercy. Lord my God, hear the cry and the prayer that your servant is praying in your presence this day. May your eyes be open toward this people at night and day, this place in which you said, my name shall be there, so that you will hear the prayer of your servant prays toward this place. Hear the supplication of your servant and of your people Israel when they pray toward this place. Hear from heaven, your dwelling place, and when you hear, forgive. 31. Anyone who wrongs their neighbor is required to take an oath, and they come and swear on the oath before your altar in this temple. When they hear from heaven, then hear from heaven and act. Judge between your servants, condemning the guilty. Remember, he's talking to the judges of all of the Israel now, here still. Hear from heaven and act. Judge between your servants, condemning the guilty and bringing down on their heads what they have done, and vindicating the innocent by treating them in accordance with their innocence. 33. When your people Israel have been defeated by an enemy because they have sinned against you, and when they turn back to you and give praise to your name, praying and making supplication to you in this temple, then hear from the heaven and forgive the sin of your people Israel, and bring them back to the land you gave to their ancestors. 35. When the heavens are shut up and there is no rain because your people have sinned against you, and when they pray toward this place and give praise to your name, and turn from their sin because you have afflicted them, then hear from heaven and forgive the sin of your servants, your people Israel. Teach them the right way to live, and send rain on the land you gave to your people for an inheritance. 37. When famine or plagues come to the land, or blight or mildew, locust or grasshoppers, or when the enemy besieges them in any of their cities, whatever disaster or disease may come, when a prayer or a plea is made by anyone among your people Israel, being aware of the afflictions of their own hearts, and spreading out their hands towards this temple, then hear from heaven, your dwelling place, forgive and act. Deal with everyone according to all they do, since you know their hearts, for you alone know every human heart, so that they will fear you all the time, and they live in the land all the time they live in the land you gave our ancestors. Verse 41. As for the foreigner who does not belong to your people Israel, but has come from a distant land because of your name, for they will hear of your great name and your mighty hand and your outstretched arm when they come and pray toward this temple. Then hear from heaven, your dwelling place. Do whatever the foreigner asks of you, so that all the peoples of the earth may know your name and fear you as your own people Israel, and may know that this house I have built bears your name. Verse 44. Then when your people go to war against the enemies, wherever you send them, when they pray to the Lord toward the city you have chosen, and the temple I have built for your name, then hear from heaven their prayer and their plea, and come up, hold their cause. 46. When they sin against you, for there is no one who does not sin, and you have become angry with them, and give them over to their enemies, who take up the captives in your lands, or far away or near, and they have a change of heart in the land they are held captive, and repent and plead with you in the land of their captors, and say, we have sinned, we have done wrong, we have acted wickedly. And if they turn back to you with all their heart and their soul in the land of their enemies who took them captive, and pray to you towards the land you gave their ancestors, towards the city you have chosen and the temple I have built for your name, then from heaven, your dwelling place, hear their prayer and their plea, and uphold their cause, and forgive your people who have sinned against you. Forgive all the offenses they have committed against you, and cause their captors to show them mercy, for they are your people and your inheritance. From you they brought out whom you brought out of Egypt, out of that iron smelting furnace. 52. May your eyes be open and your servants to your servants' pleas, and to the plea of your people Israel. May you listen to them whenever you cry out, for you singled them out from all the nations of the world to be your own inheritance, just as you declared through your servant Moses when you, sovereign Lord, brought our ancestors out of Egypt. Verse 54. When Solomon had finished all these prayers and supplications to the Lord, he rose from the altar of the Lord where he had been kneeling, with his hands spread toward heaven, and he stood and blessed the whole assembly of Israel in a loud voice, saying, Praise be to the Lord who has given rest to his people Israel, just as he promised. Not one word has failed. All the good promises he gave through his servant Moses. May the Lord our God be with us as he was with our ancestors. May he never leave us nor forsake us. May he turn our hearts to him, to walk in obedience to him, and keep the commands and decrees and laws he gave to your ancestors. And may these words of mine, which I have prayed before the Lord, be near the Lord our God this day and night, and he may uphold the cause of his servant and the cause of his people Israel, according to each day's need, so that all the peoples of the earth may know that the Lord is God, and that there is no other. And may your hearts be fully committed to the Lord your God, our God, to live by his decrees and obey his commands at this time. Verse 62. Then the king and all Israel with him offered sacrifices before the Lord. Solomon offered a sacrifice of fellowship offerings to the Lord, 22,000 cattle and 120,000 sheep and goats. So the king and all Israelites dedicated the temple of the Lord. 64. On that same day, the king consecrated the middle part of the courtyard in front of the temple of the Lord, and there he offered burnt offerings, grain offerings, and the fat fellowship offerings, because the bronze altar stood before the Lord was too small to hold the burnt offerings, the grain offerings, and the fat of the fellowship offerings. So Solomon observed the festival at that time, and all Israel with him, and a vast assembly, people from Lebo Hamath and to the Wadi of Egypt. They celebrated it before their Lord, our God, for 7 days and 7 days more, the 14 days in all. On the following day, he sent the people away. They blessed the king, and they went home, joyful and glad in their heart, for all the good things that the Lord had done for his servant David and his people Israel. Chapter 9. When Solomon had finished building the temple of the Lord and the royal place, and had achieved all he had desired to do, the Lord appeared to him a second time, as he appeared to him at Gibeon. The Lord said to him, I have heard the prayer and the plea that you made before me. I have consecrated this temple which you have built, and putting my name there forever. My eyes and my heart will always be there. As for you, if you walk before me faithfully with integrity of heart and uprightness, as David your father did, and all that I do, and do all that I command, and observe my decrees and laws, I will establish your royal throne over Israel forever, as I promised David your father when I said, You shall never fail to have a successor on the throne of Israel. Verse 6. But if you, or your descendants turn away from me and do not observe the commands and decrees I have given you, and go off and serve other gods and worship them, then I will cut off Israel from the land I have given them, and will reject this temple I have consecrated for my name. Israel will then become a byword and an object of ridicule among all peoples. This temple will become a heap of rubble. All who pass will be appalled and scoff and say, "Why has the Lord done such a thing to this land and to this temple?" People will answer, "Because they have forsaken the Lord their God, who brought their ancestors out of Egypt, and have embraced other gods, worshipping and serving them. That is why the Lord brought all this disaster on them." That's a little foreshadowing for you. Verse 10. At the end of 20 years, during which Solomon built these two buildings, the temple of the Lord and the royal palace, King Solomon gave 20 towns in Galilee to Hiram, king of Tyre, because Hiram had supplied him with all the cedar and juniper and the gold he wanted. But when Hiram went from Tyre to see the towns that Solomon had given him, he was not pleased with them. "What kind of towns are these that you have given me, my brother?" he asked, and he called them the land of Kabul, a name they have to this day. Now Hiram had sent the king 120 talents of gold. Here is the account of the forced labor King Solomon conscripted to build the Lord's temple, his own palace and the terraces, the wall of Jerusalem and Hazor, Megiddo and Gezer. Pharaoh, king of Egypt, had attacked and captured Gezer, and he had set it on fire, and he killed its Canaanite inhabitants, and then gave it as a wedding gift to his daughter, Solomon's wife. And so Solomon rebuilt Gezer. He built up lower Beth Horon, Baalath, and Tadmor in the desert within his land. And as well as all the shore cities and the towns for his chariots and for his horses, and whatever he desired to build in Jerusalem, in Lebanon, and throughout all the territory he ruled. Verse 20. There were still people left from Amorites, Hittites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites. These peoples were not Israelites. Solomon conscripted the descendants of all the people remaining in the land, whom the Israelites could not exterminate, to serve as slave labor as it is to this day. But Solomon did not make slaves of any Israelites. They were his fighting men, his government officials, his officers, his captains, and the commanders of his chariots and charioteers. They were also the chief officials in charge of Solomon's projects, 550 officials supervising those who did the work. 24. After Pharaoh's daughter had come up from the city of David to the palace Solomon had built for her, he constructed the terraces. 3 times a year Solomon sacrificed burnt offerings and fellowship offerings on the altar he had built for the Lord, burning incense before the Lord along with them, and so fulfilled the temple obligations. 26. King Solomon also built ships at Ezion Geber, which is near Etham in Edom, on the shore of the Red Sea. And Hiram sent his men, sailors who knew the sea, to serve in the fleet with Solomon's men. They sailed to Ophir and brought back 420 talents of gold, which they delivered to King Solomon. Chapter 10. When the Queen of Sheba heard about the fame that Solomon and his relationship to the Lord, she came to test Solomon with hard questions. Arriving in Jerusalem with a very great caravan, with camels carrying spices, quantities of gold and precious stones, she came to Solomon and talked with him about all that she had on her mind. Solomon answered all her questions. Nothing was too hard for the king to explain to her. When the queen of Sheba saw all the wisdom of Solomon and the palace he had built, and the food on his table, and the seating of his officials, and the attending servants in their robes, and his cupbearers, and the burnt offerings he made at the temple of the Lord, she was overwhelmed. Verse 6. She said to the king, "The report I heard in my country about your achievements and your wisdom is true. But I did not believe these things until I came and saw with my own eyes. Indeed, not even half was told me. Not even half was told me. In wisdom and in wealth you have far exceeded the report I heard. How happy your people must be! How happy your officials who continually stand before you and hear your wisdom! Praise be to the Lord your God, who has delighted in you and placed you on the throne of Israel. Because of the Lord's eternal love for Israel, he has made you king to maintain justice and righteousness." Verse 10. And she gave the king 120 talents of gold, large quantities of spices and precious stones. Never again were so many spices brought in as the queen of Sheba gave to King Solomon. Verse 11. Hiram's ships brought gold from Ophir, and from there they brought the great cargoes of algum wood and precious stones. The king used the algum wood to make supports for the temple of the Lord and for the royal palace, and to make harps and lyres for the musicians. So much algum wood that was never imported or seen since that day. 13. King Solomon gave the queen of Sheba all she desired and asked for, besides what he had given her out of his royal bounty. Then she left and returned with her retinue to her own country. Verse 14. They weighed the gold that Solomon received was nearly 666 talents, not including the revenues from the merchants and traders and all the Arabian kings and the governors of the territories. King Solomon made 200 large shields of hammered gold. 600 shekels of gold went into each shield. He also made 300 small shields of hammered gold, with 3 minas of gold in each. The king put them in the palace of the forest of Lebanon. Verse 18. Then the king made a great throne covered with ivory and overlaid with fine gold. The throne had 6 steps at its back and a rounded top. On both sides of the seat were armrests, with a lion standing beside each of them. 12 lions stood on the 6 steps, one at either end of each step. Nothing like it had ever been made for any other kingdom. All the King Solomon's goblets were gold. All the household articles in the palace of the forest of Lebanon were pure gold. Nothing was made of silver, because silver was considered of little value in Solomon's days. The king had a fleet of trading ships at the sea, along with the ships of Hiram. Once every 3 years it returned, carrying gold, silver, and ivory, and apes and baboons. 23. King Solomon's ranch was like Michael Jackson's ranch. It was just way bigger and better. It's crazy, isn't it? I just got to joke around sometimes. Verse 23. King Solomon was greater in riches and wisdom than all the other kings of the earth. The whole world sought the audience with Solomon to hear the wisdom that God had put in his heart. Year after year, everyone who came brought a gift, articles of silver, gold, robes, weapons, and spices, and horses and mules. Solomon accumulated chariots and horses. He had 1,400 chariots and 12,000 horses, each which he kept in the chariot cities, and also with him in Jerusalem. The king made silver as common in Jerusalem as stones, and cedar as plentiful as sycamore fig trees in the foothills. Solomon's horses were imported from Egypt and from Kew. The royal merchants purchased from them from Kew at the current price, and they imported a chariot from Egypt for 600 shekels of silver, and a horse for 150. They also exported them to all the kings of the Hittites and the Arameans. Man, he's starting to fall away. You know, if you remember back in the beginning of 1 Samuel, you see Solomon is exceeding the things that God told him to do. He told him not to multiply wives, not to multiply gold, and not to multiply horses. And we see him doing all of those things. He's not thinking about all that. And it's going to bite Israel in the rear eventually. Well, we're getting into this, guys. We're well over a quarter. We're getting on a third of the way finished. The Bible is just awesome. And this is where it gets to be something incredible. Well, it started out incredible, and it's just keeping going. All right, I'm tired. Y'all have a wonderful day. Love you. Thank you for watching.